Hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Homecomings podcast. I'm your host, Evelina Olachowska, multi-passionate creative soul designer and founder of my dear design studio, Studio Domka. And today I'm bringing back Ashley Abramson on the show. I'm going to link our original episode that we did last year, I want to say, if not 2 years ago. Not sure of timing wise, but it'll be there in the show notes for you guys to give more context on Ashley, all that she is, her amazing story. Definitely tune back and listen to that one because it was so good and so chock full of nuggets to really, I think, ground this deeper conversation that we have that, of course, in the context and realm of this season is more focused on change and transitions, but really gives a little bit more clarity to some of the concepts that she goes into and talks about. But I look forward to this conversation, and I very much was looking forward to in recording it with Ashley, because we're touching on change and transition through a completely different lens, but also one that I think is very close to home for a lot of people, and that is the lens of travel. Travel is something that has always been, or has been the last several years for sure, very personal to me and has been a huge teacher. And so it is, in this season of Ashley's life, a massive teacher for her, and has come with unearthing so many of these stories and narratives that she has been holding on to, and quite frankly, that anyone could be holding on to when it, or as it relates to completely having your context and environment uprooted to something so novel, so different. So Ashley has been traveling all of Asia since, I want to say, October of last year of 2024. And she'll share more of her story in the episode, so I'll spare the details and repeating myself here. But it was an inspired thought that happened over the summer that slowly unfolded into a very, well, I don't want to say slowly, it actually happened quite quickly, that once the thought was landed for her and her partner, Patrick, the next steps were quite quick in selling all their things, leaving Tampa, their home, and just embarking on this journey of truly unknown without having a real plan. Or maybe, I don't believe we touched on it in this conversation, there were some general expectations of where they were going to go, what they were going to do. And I think very quickly what became apparent was just really surrendering and going with the flow. And that's essentially what Ashley is still now currently doing with her partner, Patrick, continuing to travel Asia and just allowing themselves to be guided in real time to whatever their journey brings for them. And so much of this conversation is questions around the moments of our lives where we are guided, inspired thoughts, inspired moments to do something. But beyond that, within the context of travel, what that looks like, of being away from creature comforts, being away from routines and things that we know as so familiar, things that we like to control, or that we think we have control of. At least Ashley sheds light on that concept where, even though we may be living our day to day at home and having a routine and having a set job and thinking that we are in control, really the question at the core of it is, are we actually? Because tomorrow anything could happen. Our house can burn down. We could lose a loved one. We can, anything, right? Like if you've experienced sudden loss or a big shift, an unexpected shift in your life, you're no stranger to something like this unfolding. And for Ashley and her partner, this is something that they're being met with every single day, because they've quite literally let go of 99% of their creature comforts by selling all their things and living out of a backpack, but also being in unfamiliar context and territory. Oftentimes not being able to communicate with people, being exposed to foods that are so counter to what they normally eat, being typically very health conscious individuals and people. And so I think there's so much to be garnered here from this conversation for anyone who is an avid traveler, anyone who loves to take vacations, because let's be honest, like, who doesn't? I don't doubt that anyone tuning into this conversation isn't going to walk away with maybe just some downloads or insights, and maybe thinking about when they're planning their next trip or next vacation or whatever kind of next venture unfolding for them, how they can maybe start to see travel in a little bit of a different light. And again, we're using travel in this conversation as just as the theme of this discussion. And we mention it in our dialogue many times, but it's with anything in our lives. And to kind of zoom out and bring it back to this more broader topic of change in general, whether it is something like changing your context or changing a relationship or changing a job, there are all of these things in our lives, external to ourselves, of course, that we place so much weight on. And so much of my journey and a lot of what I shared in my first episode of my story today is being mindful and paying attention to how much weight I have been placing in different things, whether that was my trips, whether that was money, whether that was the success of my business. All of these things, these symbols, these objects are really meant to be teachers for us if we choose to see them that way, to help us go deeper within ourselves and really observe and see if we can understand the story that we're holding on to. And I think I would be, I'll speak for myself and I'll just share for sure. I was someone who was absolutely seeking a lot of my salvation in my trips. And so when that had to stop and that had to pause, there was so much uncomfort in that. And I love so much of what Ashley shares in her story. And I think a lot of you tuning in will be surprised to hear that, yes, she too held on to those stories for sure, but how vastly different and surprising. Because even still, when I check in with her and I talk with her actively, because we're still working together, she's my coach, she's my mentor. And so she's always, sharing her experiences, but I find myself being surprised of like, oh shit, like you're doing that or you're, having this experience that almost feels so counter to, we could say this more broad stereotypical idea of traveling. And as an example, and we talked about in this episode of like, the expectation that you're going to see all these things. You have your itinerary, you're going to scratch these things off your list, where there are certain trips that Ashley and Patrick have taken where they actually don't see anything at all. And they're just sitting in their hotel room because that's what they really needed in that moment. And so it kind of just peels the curtain back a little bit of how much of these highlight reels and glamorized, maybe overly glamorized visuals that we're getting from whoever of their trips and experiences, and just seeing it be sold to us, this vacation, this trip, as something that's a lot of times, yes, an escape, but something that's going to give us so much of this relief and satisfaction and, insert whatever feeling you're seeking there, right? But then you go back to reality and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm back to this. And it's because you never faced what was deep down within you. You are just using travel as, we can even say, generally speaking, a coping mechanism to, whether it is escape or run away or temporarily walk away from and pause your current reality. But when you come back from that trip, tell me you feel this, friends, because I have for sure felt this. Those Sunday scaries that come up after like a beautiful vacation, you're like, I have to go back to work now. And it's like you temporarily avoided work. Travel was that, opportunity for you to step away from it. But what's the deeper thing here that's actually at the core? Is it an invitation to change your job? Is it an invitation to have a conversation with your boss or whatever that is, right? But sharing that, as I think that could be very relatable. I've personally experienced it so much. I remember working in my, corporate offices and just absolutely feeling the dread of going back into work after a trip like that. And I think now I can see it so clearly of where I was placing so much of my salvation and my rescue in that experience, only to come back and face reality, which again, let's be real, like a vacation is 1, 2, 3 weeks of your time throughout the year. And then the other 98%, you're faced with doing the same thing every day. So sharing that as an opportunity for reflection there, and really just the reminder to keep an open mind in this one, friends, and just see what comes up. But I love, love, love having these deep dialogues and discussions with individuals. And I personally, for me, I find they're the most fruitful and fulfilling when I can go so deep with my guest and also have them be so open in sharing their experiences. And Ashley's no stranger to that. So very much looking forward to sharing her story again on this show. and very curious too on what you guys think about this one. Feel free to reach out, send me an email, hello@studiojumka, or just a DM on Instagram, and let me know your thoughts. So without further ado now, friends, I give you Ashley Abramson and her amazing and very inspiring travel takeaways. Well, Ashley, welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have you. It's interesting. I'm looking forward to this conversation today because, as you know, that I've shared with you, I've been focusing the season on this topic of change and transition. And to date, I've interviewed, I'd say 3 or 4 people. I think you're my 5th. So the conversations I've had to date have, of course, touched on this topic, but interestingly in this realm of like business and career. And we may touch on that in our chat, but I feel like where I want to go in this dialogue with you is really anchoring into change in the context of, well, context, literally, and things like environment. And from there, obviously, bleeding into change in life, because of course it's all interconnected. So super excited to pick your brain about just the season of life you're in, because it's so different, and is definitely a big change from especially when we last talked. So I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I'm just excited to have you back.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. You know how much I love you, and our conversations are always so wonderful. And I'm excited that you have been led and inspired to do another season of the podcast. I feel like this is really in alignment for you and really is just opened a beautiful door. So I'm excited to be here. Talk about
Thank you so
change,
much.
transitions, all the things.
Yay. Well, thank you. Thank you. And as you know, actually, I don't know if I was asking this question when I had interviewed you it was the 2nd season. But I've been kicking off each episode with my little icebreaker of what is something that is bringing you joy this month?
What is something that brings you joy? I think just the continued shedding and the continued opportunities for joy. The more darkness that's uncovered in the process of our travels and, the deepening of the unwinding, it's the more opportunities for joy that present themselves. And, you can intellectually hear that, but then to actually experience it is such a beautiful thing. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. I'm being brought joy by witnessing all of the additional opportunities for even deeper joy and deeper leaning into a constant state of joy forever.
I love this. And I'm excited to just dive in and ask you more specific questions, and also just like open the floor up to you sharing your experience on what those moments look like. And I know you've been sharing them with me in our Lighthouse group and just personally when we connect, but and the reason why I'm looking forward to this chat so much is because I think there's so much relatability to the stories that you experience. And something that I so love about you is when you share these, they almost feel like small moments of like you experiencing something, whether it's with Patrick or just, I don't know, in your daily life. And yet there's such a beautiful perspective shift or lesson that's part of it. And you share so openly and you share so vulnerably. And I always just find so much resonance. So hopefully for people tuning in and listening, they too are able to just find so much relatability in your experiences. And I think specifically around the topic of travel, I mean, travel to me is something so personal. And as you know that I've shared with you, has been like a huge part of my life in the last several years, to the point where it wasn't up until last year where I just had this stark realization, we'll call it an ego death for sure, of observing where I was placing so much weight in travel. You use the analogy of the happiness backpack, where we are, actually, I'd love for you to explain it. What is the happiness backpack? Because I for sure was putting a lot of my happiness backpack into travel.
Yeah. Well, the happiness backpack really came about when I started doing some videos of observation, like watching the Kardashians and stuff. And it was an easy way to articulate when we are seeking salvation in something outside of ourselves. So when I say salvation, it's essentially the first question you ask me, like seeking our joy, our fulfillment, our, just that wholeness within outside of us. And essentially that's placing our happiness backpack on that person, place, thing, whatever. It can be anything outside of you that's being projected. And so what you believe is that thing, and for you in that moment it was travel carried your happiness backpack, meaning that if you didn't travel you couldn't be happy, but also meaning that you should always be happy in travel. So it's really just like setting yourself up for colossal failure and disappointment. And
Yeah.
it may be beautiful at the beginning because there's something that made you believe that this contained your happiness backpack, right? So there was a moment of spark, whether it was you personally or watching someone else get the spark from this thing. I mean, a big piece that most people place their happiness backpack in is money and success, right? Like that is a huge thing, especially in the business world right now. And building your own business and being that, solopreneur and that badass woman and, all the narratives, we can go on and on forever. But we've decided that like this thing is my only way to gain my happiness. But the truth is your happiness is within, like nothing outside of you can ever shake that unless you allow it to, which is how the happiness backpack came in. So then Evelina gave her happiness backpack to travel. So that means like if things didn't go exactly as planned or she didn't get to travel because she ran out of money or this or that, all of a sudden her happiness is gone because she no longer has control over the happiness backpack, but instead the concept of travel does, which is like a concept, right? It's something that you
Right.
actually never will have control over.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that context because I think it'll be helpful for people tuning in. And hopefully, as Ashley was sharing that, maybe some light bulbs were going off on moments where you two have placed weight on something, whether it was travel or money or even just like a milestone. Because I've been really working through this in the last year, especially of like, when I get to this place, then I will be. It's like looking ahead and hoping that an outcome, and again, you said it, like something outside of yourself is going to bring you that joy and that inner peace. And again, it was a lot of in working with you and coming to realize where it's so interesting because travel for me started as something that I will say was such a beautiful tool to help me connect with myself and really take me out of this fear of being alone. Like I was so deeply nervous. I remember coming out of a long-term relationship. At this point, it's like 5 or 6 years ago now. And I didn't know how to be by myself because I depended so much on my partner. And so I remember taking my first solo trip and I was so nervous. I'm like, how am I going to have dinner by myself or like do this? And the more that I did it, the more that I saw myself blossoming and opening and becoming more comfortable and no longer feeling this weight or this fear of just really truly being myself. But
Mm-hmm.
over time, and it's so funny when I look back, it's like it was slow how it happened, but the shift kind of transformed into like, now I need travel all the time. And like travel brings me so much joy and all of
Mm-hmm.
this. So beautiful lesson for sure, but a hard one for me to realize last year of how much weight was being placed on that. And I will say what has been fascinating is observing how I just don't have the pull or the pull whenever I get a spark to go somewhere. It's so much different than before. And I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe you could speak more to this around this idea of like taking weight off of something. And I'm sure people have experienced this, like when you bring awareness to something where you might have been placing weight on, but then that thing comes back up again. It's like you no longer feel that charge anymore. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
you could speak a little bit to like the context behind the scenes of what's happening there and like
Mm-hmm.
maybe the internal, I don't know, processes or something that someone's navigating in order to no longer feel that same energy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's the biggest piece is like the release of the stories. So travel held a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stories for you. It held your independence. It held your, I mean, I think independence is probably like the really big one here. But then the newness. You were constantly seeing newness. So it was like a constant distraction for you as well from what really was going on within. Because I remember when you finally started to grapple with, oh my gosh, maybe I'm running from some things now. Like you really had to sit in a lot of dark thoughts and stories came up around that, around you, staying in your hometown and, just all these different things. But you had to see them for what they were, which were stories, and choose not to identify with them and to just like honor, like, oh yeah, this was a story I was carrying, and like let it through. Because I think that's a big misnomer, in the world today, is about like, if you speak it, it will come true, abracadabra. But the truth is that if you think it, that's where the power is. Words are just symbols twice removed. Words don't actually, they're created by man, right? Like, so words are just symbols twice removed from truth. Truth is at the level of the mind. So before you ever speak something out, it's already been in the mind. So if it's in the mind and you are ashamed and pushing it in, then it's just going to get stuck there, and it's going to stay there and essentially become a part of you and become like an identifying piece of who you are, a part of your story. And it was really a story you didn't necessarily choose either, because it is almost like through ignoring it, it became a part of it. So when you instead allow them to come out, and it can be speaking, it can be journaling, it can be whatever form, but it's really releasing that weight, like we talked earlier about the story and what it means. So then, like for you, travel then has like metamorphosed into something that's very, I don't know, like, I mean, if anybody's listening to this and Evelina prior, like I would say her shift has been so extreme to now she's like a homebody. Like it has to be something very enticing to get her to go. I mean, she's even been offered free trips to Caribbean destinations, yeah. And all she had to do was use her points to get a flight, and she turned those down. So like it really has swung the pendulum. But I wouldn't say into like the other side where you're putting weight on not going. It's just like, it's really this neutrality of like, same, like it just is. And so to you, like for you, I see your stories more about like the connections. So like Lewis, your partner and you like to go travel, but anytime you've been traveling, at least so far, it's really about reconnecting with family, reconnecting with friends, like these different opportunities of connection, and even deepening connection for the two of you. Like the first time you went to Colombia, like I remember that was like a family thing, but it was also really this opportunity for you two to see how you operated together outside of the day-to-day routines of going to the gym and, all the things you already did. So I don't know, I'm going off on a tangent, but essentially your stories shifted, right? Like your story shifted, and they were only able to shift not by you like sitting down and being like, I, Evelina, am going to have a news story about travel. No, it was just like you had to allow the darkness to come to the light. That's what it was. The heavy stories to come to the light, and then just be in this place of complete surrender.
Yeah, no, the story piece is so huge. And I think you said it so perfectly. It is so much about shifting the story there. So I want to jump into all of your season, where you're navigating, all the things that you're doing now. And I feel like it would be really helpful for listeners if you could just share context of what you're doing. Like what is Ashley up to now? And maybe take us back to the decision to even go, because I want to dive into, after that, I'd love to dive into understanding more of your stories around the travel, and especially what's come up as we dive deeper into the conversation. But to start, let us in on what's happening, where you're currently located, and just what's been really unfolding the last several months on your experience of travel.
Yeah, so different. I first want to say, like, I have such a similar story to you, Evelina. Like, after I went through my divorce, like, my first big trip was a solo trip to Paris. I'd never been out of the country. So I had built a lot of my independence around travel as well. And then, like, moving to Florida and stuff. So that's just some like context of like, I have stories similar to that when it comes to travel and what that represented and the independence and I can do this on my own and, you know, really the excitement. And I fell in love with Paris and I didn't want to leave. And come to find out it was because I really saw myself for who I truly was there, because I let myself truly be who I was, because I had all these stories and masks that have been created back home. But so fast forward, I think we've narrowed it down to maybe July of last year. We were coming up on our lease being up, and Pat and I, neither of us know when this conversation actually happened. We don't even really know if there was a conversation, because it ultimately came as an inspired idea. And inspiration usually isn't something you sit and contemplate and plan. It just comes and you just go. It just is. It's like it's always been and it always will be. And you don't have to like understand where it came from, because you don't even question that. It's just like, it just has been. And for us, it was like, let's sell everything and let's head towards Thailand. Let's go. And really the space we were at, like in our own spiritual development, because I would say that's where we're at, is like, we're really on our journey of spiritual, healing and deeper remembrance of the oneness and traveling further into the mind and unwinding. We both spent many years in personal development and then really into like, I'm a little magician and, you know, a lot of the new age movement, and then really shifted deeper into what is this really about? What is really going on here? So a piece of that was really unwinding stories, right? Unwinding stories and going deeper into this place of trust and surrender. And in Tampa, I think we had kind of hit a plateau. I think we'd hit a plateau of unwinding as far as we could. And then we had a few simple routines, but we later found out were very, very large stories that things were hidden behind. But so we just had this inspiration to sell everything, and it just aligned. Like it, when inspired things happen, it's just, and I mean, within 2 months, we had sold almost all of our stuff, our vehicle, like it just, everything just, I can't even make it up. It just aligned so beautifully. And we attempted to stay in Florida longer than we were supposed to, obviously. And the hurricane hit, and we tried and we tried and we tried to stay for that final month. And it was a mess, and it was so painful. And it was like our first real, I think, aha moment of like, this is what trust and surrender is. Because the second we finally were like, let's go, let's just go to your parents' house, spend our last month in North Carolina. And we kind of just surrendered to the push we were getting instead of pushing back. And the second we crossed that Florida-Georgia line, I am not kidding you, there was synchronicities and miracles just lighting up left and right. It was the fastest road trip I've ever been on. It happened in like, it was like time didn't even exist. It was, I mean, we could do like 2 podcasts about that 8-hour drive. But that really reiterated to us, like, this is what we're seeking. We decided to do this to not travel the world like most people would. And when I say most people, like usually when you think travel, and we get this a lot, like, what are you seeing? What are you doing? That's what people travel for, is like, let's go see the wonders of the world. Let's go eat all the food. Let's go, you know, do all of these things in these other countries, when really our intention is to go deeper within the mind. So by us traveling, what we've really found is like, it's like a celestial speed up of seeing all these areas of stories that are still hiding behind routine or preferences, or, you know, routine and preferences is a big thing. And the reason why we're seeing them is because, like, even if you get into a routine, it doesn't last very long, right? Because we're only in a place for a short period of time, and like foods change, places change, people change. And so our travel, I was saying the other day, we're mind traveling mystics. So we may be moving place to place. It may appear that way, but truly for us, it's like just deeper within the mind. Every time we move is deeper and deeper, and our travel looks so different.
sorry to interrupt. Can you actually just like go a
Yeah.
little deeper on that? When you say going deeper into the mind, just to give listeners context, like what exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So for me, what it really means is allowing deeper and deeper stories to come up. So what we don't realize is like even our preferences of like your type of toothpaste or the temperature of a room or the pillow you use. I mean, these things that are just like, it's just what it is at my house, right? I have these things. Like we have fear and shame and guilt that is hiding behind that. And we use that external projection to pacify and to ignore that shame and guilt. And when it's taken away, that shame, that darkness has to come up. It has to go somewhere. And really, so when I say going deeper within the mind, you don't realize, we do a lot of this really deep personal development work, right? So we intentionally go excavating, I say, which I don't think is necessary at all. But when you intentionally go excavating, it's always about like some major event, right? Like, oh my gosh, when I was a kid, I was abused. We've got to go heal that, or we got to do this. But what you're missing is like, yes, those seem like big moments, but to spirit, and to truth, all of that is the same. And I know that might prickle to people that maybe have experienced something major in their life, but it's all the same. So that means pain could be hidden there, but it also could be hidden in you stubbing your toe at one point, or this or that. So by us shifting constantly and allowing ourselves to deepen in the trust and surrender, that's really what we're doing. More of those stories that have been hiding behind these things are coming up. The darkness, it's getting darker and darker, is coming up more and more into the light. So when I say deeper in the mind, it's these areas that you would never guess.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't intentionally think, oh, I've got a story hidden behind the type of yogurt that we eat and how much protein it has.
Mm-hmm.
That's been one of my recent,
Yeah, I actually had a
grappling.
thought this morning, and I share this because it could be super relatable too for people tuning in. I mean, I think the example that you just shared is actually very relatable on how much weight we put on preferences of like food. Like, I have to eat this thing, otherwise, whatever kind of narrative we have behind that. But, I'm in the middle of this transition in my life of moving in with Lewis and my partner in this apartment right now. And it's like, if you guys could see what's happening like in front of me and on the sides, like it's just boxes, and we just sold his coffee table. So there's like this big empty space in the living room. And I was doing yoga this morning, and there was like this thought of like, I feel uncomfortable, or like this uncomfort is starting to come up because I don't have my things in place yet. But like, and I'd actually maybe love for you to speak on this, Ashley. And we could get into like, because I love some of the stories you've shared in our Lighthouse group too, around like the weight you were placing on food specifically and what came up for you too. I think that could be really illuminating for people. But I caught the thought this morning. I observed myself thinking, oh man, like I feel like once this apartment is comfortable, or I have all these things in place, then I will. And back to what we started with of like placing our happiness backpack on these external things. What was interesting is I so in that moment saw what I was doing. I'm like, no, this isn't about the stuff. Like, if this apartment was bare, could I still find my happiness and peace, internal peace, without placing weight on these things, on these creature comforts, on these routines? Because I'm someone too that for a long time has really leaned so heavily on her morning routine, like get up every day, drink my water, do my yoga flow. And the dismantling of that, especially in the last several months, I mean, I can't say I have a morning routine anymore. And I will say with just, I guess, some happiness and pride of like, it hasn't been bugging me that much. But I have noticed this morning, like waking up, and that thought just came in of like, ooh, I'm starting to kind of want to lean on those comforts. So curious on your thoughts on that. And if you could even maybe going into some personal experiences where you've navigated those things, whether it's related to food, I know there was a moment where you were really craving your comfy blanket at one point with your travels.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us more.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a projection, right? So anytime we find ourselves missing something or wanting something, it's because, again, like I said, we've been projecting out on it. We've been hiding behind whatever that is. So I think a key point you brought up is the if then or the then statement. I don't know what the statement would be, but
Yeah, if
essentially,
X,
like,
then
once
Y.
my
Yeah.
apartment, yeah, once my apartment is this way, then. Well, also because we don't have a then, right? Like, we left and we're just like going. So some of these creature comforts like Kachava, like, oh my gosh, Evelina knows how much I love my Kachava. Like, I miss that so much. I can't even create that statement in my head because I don't know when I'll ever be somewhere that I can actually get access to it again.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like full shedding of everything, because you can't even be like, like when you go on vacation, right? And you're like, oh, I'm going to eat all the local food for 2 weeks because I'm going to go home and I'm going to detox and blah, blah, blah. Like, you always have this ability to be like, oh, it's just, I'll be back home in a couple weeks. Even if you go for 6 months, you'll be like, I'll be back in 6 months and we'll figure it out. That is something you can even hide behind there. But when you are fully living in the present moment, it is the here and now. There is not any projection of the future. You are dealing with what is coming up now in this moment, period. And so we've had a lot of expression sessions, is what I would say, that have been very dark. They've been very, very, very dark. And I think to many in society would automatically activate shame and guilt, because the darkness that comes up, the thoughts that you realize are actually in the mind that need to be released, are scary. You're like, how could I be thinking these thoughts? Like, this is awful. And the last thing you want to do is to allow them to move through, because it's almost like we've been taught, again, if you speak it, it will come true. But also if you like give it headspace, right, in your brain, if you actually give it any sort of focus, then for sure it's true. But it already is, because it's already in the mind. Like, the truth is, you're thinking that, period. Whether you let it out, you shove it in, whatever you want to do with it, that's what's in there. So food has been a massive place of expression for me for this entire trip. And I would say it's an in the moment thing. So like, we'll be, headed out to go somewhere to eat or something, and I will literally have a massive breakdown, and it's all blamed on the food, right? I'm like, oh my gosh, because we're never going to get food, and I'm getting so fat, and oh my gosh, and like all these stories. And then as it continues to express out in this safe manner, that's never what it was about. It was never about the food, but it was this darkness hiding behind. And the more that expression has come through, the more that we've settled into this space of like, same. It just is. Like, we don't even really go out to eat. We just get whatever. We eat the same food every single day because we really see it as the same. I guess if we felt, inspired to go eat, we would. Like yesterday we did. But otherwise, it's like, we're really trying to find the space of just like relinquishment of weight on all. But it was only capable to get there through the like expression sessions, which is really allowing whatever is underneath to come out, and not to be like, oh, this is stupid, this makes no sense, or this is like dramatic, this is scary, but like just keep allowing. And like probably the first like 3-4 months of our travel, that was a very frequent occurrence, was expression sessions. And I would say, I think Pat said 2 days ago, he's like, I think we've turned a corner. I was like, what do you mean a corner? He's like, I think we've turned a corner in our travel. Like, we're on a different, I'm like, don't say that.
Don't jinx it.
Yeah.
Don't jinx it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I love this. I'll let you finish. Go ahead. Finish your thought. Finish up.
no, I was just going to say, but I mean, that's like the biggest thing that I think was the hardest for me at the beginning, was like fighting it. really fighting,
Mm-hmm.
like, this doesn't make sense. Like, why would I be that upset about Kachava? Blah, blah. Instead of like not giving it another story, right? So my story was like, I'm having a nervous breakdown about Kachava. That doesn't seem real. So then I would dumb it down. But when like it happened a few times, it got to the point where I was like, oh, it's about like not even making a story at all and just letting it come out. If it wants to say it's about Kachava, whatever, but like don't identify with it. Just let it come out, let it come out, let it come out, let it come out. Try not to create a new story in the process to tie it back down. And it's really, for me, it's handing it over to Holy Spirit and Jesus and being like, here it is, here it is. Give me clear perspective on this. Give me clear perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, as you were speaking, it's just making me think of like all of these super beautiful, glamorous hot takes and reels and highlights from people traveling. And I mean, I've done this too myself of like when I travel and like sharing obviously just like the beautiful sights and the scenes, but then those moments that are really challenging you against routine and your comforts, because I've had many breakdowns during my trips too, of like being so overwhelmed, whether it's like not finding the right food to eat. I really like, I think the last several months, especially, something I've been actively trying to just unwind and detach the stories from are how much weight I place on time and like things being a certain way. So when I make a schedule or an itinerary about travels,
Mm.
it's like I need to do this and jam pack it, and then all at the while it's like just overwhelm, or it's that part of me that's trying to control and or placing weight and a story attached to something there of like feeling that fulfillment and satisfaction. And so I think you sharing this and like it's just interesting because I think I've been obviously like tuning in with you, Ashley, and listening to more of these shares for months now as you started on your travels. And it just so flies in the face of this like perception, I think, that a lot of us, if not all of us, have around the glamour of maybe living abroad or digitally nomading. I mean, that was a dream I had for so long. I mean, I up and nearly went and left last year to go back to Europe and really take this digital nomad life full time. And so it's just so interesting, but I think really beautiful too to hear you shed light on almost something that is so counter to what people believe is the glamour, because I think there's a deeper truth into what you're experiencing, and in definitely a challenging but interesting teacher, if we could call travel being for you in unearthing all of these narratives and helping you basically kind of like see the truth of it so much. What's coming to mind for me that I want to ask you about is the example that you shared. I think I just asked you last week of like, what have you guys been up to in like, or in Malaysia? Like, how did you spend your time in Malaysia? Because you guys were there for what, a couple weeks or so? And
Like 16 days, I think. Yeah.
and you're like, oh, we didn't do anything. And then immediately I'm like, oh, how do you, like internally, I'm like, wait, you didn't even like see anything? So like, tell us about that, because I think that in itself, outside of the food stuff, but similar, is another story of like having to see and experience.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And I mean, that's been like a thing of unwinding for myself too, because again, I had all those dreams of like traveling the world, being a nomad, and by no means, I mean, probably part of that was sparked because I'll say to Patrick, I'll be like, why did we ever leave Florida? It was the same. He's like, because you were bored. And I was like, I wasn't bored. I was misguided. I was confused with what was going on in the world. But also it would have been a much slower process of unwinding. But I think that it has been such a huge challenge. And I think probably in the last, since Bali, right before Bali, I've really settled into this realization of everything is the same and the world doesn't come to an end if I don't go see the temple, if I don't go see the Baton Caves, if I don't go, see whatever the things were to see in Malaysia, because I've also seen a lot of those things. So when we went to Bangkok, we saw some things that we were guided through inspiration. And we also saw some things when we weren't guided through inspiration, but we forced ourselves. And first of all, the forced day, because Bangkok was one of our first stops after Doha. Doha was like the most magical portal ever for us to like enter into this travel. And then it went real quick. But Bangkok, when we got there, it was like, here we are, we're our little nomads. Let's go check out the world during the day and see all the sights. And then at night we'll work and we'll eat all the food and it's going to be so magical and beautiful. And because we had this like vision of what it needed to look like, it was very forced. It was very plain. It was like, okay, we got to go see this, and this, and blah, blah. And I remember the first day we went out like that, and it was really structured plan of what we needed to see. Pat and I fought. It was awful. Like, I couldn't stand him. He couldn't stand me. Like, it was just this deep, immense, like, I mean, it was a fully ego-driven day. And then we kind of just had this, like, come to Jesus moment, I guess. I think we had a Patreon call, and Tommy, I think, said something. It just really sparked in us, all right, we need to go back to inspiration. And like 2 days later, we had a day that was just led in this like most beautiful, inspired way. And we saw a couple places, but we saw them like it was just like a stop for like 15 minutes. Saw them, took your pictures. Oh, that's cool. Get the heck out of there. But it was about the connection we made, because the more we're traveling, the more we're seeing these sites that you see are not what they appear to be in the pictures, first of all. And second of all, it doesn't bring some sort of fulfillment going to them. And it's, I don't even know how to explain it, because it's like the elephant sanctuary. I want to go see elephants, right? And of course, like there's a lot of elephant sanctuaries that like are not very humane in Thailand. So then you want to find the elephant sanctuary that's humane. And so then I find one, and they have this all day trip where you get to spend the whole day with the elephants. And that's what I want to do. And well, they're all booked out for the entire time we're here because we waited till last minute. So my mind goes into the traveler mind of like, oh, okay, now we're not even going to see the elephants and blah, blah, blah. And I start to go down the old rabbit hole of stories like that. And I stop myself and I'm like, what does it matter? And I like really truly felt within myself, like, if you leave here and never see an elephant, does it matter? And I was like, no, it doesn't. So then I brought myself back to what is the purpose? And the purpose here is to follow the guidance and the inspiration. And as of now, I don't feel inspired to sign up for any of the other elephant things. I might in a couple of days, I might not. But to me, it's about following the guidance, leaning deeper into the trust and surrender, which sometimes has us sitting in our hotel room watching videos of David and reading A Course in Miracles and, you know, doing our work and connecting with like-minded individuals. And some days it has us out venturing out to a new coffee shop or, you know, to go see a temple or something like that. But it's not about my plan as a persona needing to see these things to post them on my Instagram, but instead it's about where am I being guided? Where does spirit need me right now? So being used as the vessel. And when you really start to live your life that way, you realize that joy is in everything. So like joy is in me sitting here all day. Pat and I don't know what we did today. I was almost finishing a book. He was reading the course. We took a couple naps. We went grocery shopping. We do a lot of grocery shopping. So like we know grocery stores, but it was a beautiful, joyous day, right? And I'm here in Chiang Mai and we've not really done much of anything. And I know that if we would have felt guided to go to the elephant sanctuary today, it would have been a joyous day as well. So when you're going internal and really start to understand where your happiness backpack is located, and who truly is in control, it removes the shininess, which many people would be like, well, then isn't life boring? which we had a conversation about this Patreon earlier today. And at first you might feel that way because you're so used to the way the ego thinks, where it needs to be like extreme highs and extreme lows. But the more you unwind from that story, the more like it's just this deep joy and peace and contentment with all. So it's like, no, it's like, this is where Gandhi was. This is where Jesus and Buddha and Mother Teresa were. That's why they were happy all the time. Gandhi was in prison. And he was just like so deeply blessed and happy. Because it wasn't about outside of him. It was always about within.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I really went off on a tangent there.
No, that was so good. And what I would love to maybe dive into a little bit more is you sharing, maybe just going a little deeper on this whole notion of being guided and following the inspiration. Because I feel like, and this little light bulb went off for me as you were speaking about it, you know, I'm actively talking to people about seasons of change and transition and all that. And even hearing your story and asking you about the change that has come with travel and how that's so uncomfortable. And again, a lot of people at least may have this negative connotation with change, and change could be disruptive and it could be uncomfortable. But I wonder if of course, because I do so much believe in the power of perspective and, you know, shifting that perspective firstly, but I think so much of it too could be rooted in how in these periods of change where there could be so much unknown, whether it's taking a trip or you're transitioning a job or leaving a relationship, there's so much unknown. And so we find ourselves more often than not forcing instead of allowing inspiration to guide us. That can feel really heavy and weighted. And I wonder if an answer or just something to remember or lean on in these moments is just coming back to being guided, coming back to inspiration, paying attention to those moments that feel more easeful. Of course, this is such a dance of discernment and really being so mindful and aware of what's coming up for you. I think the thing that I often struggle with is knowing, like, is this something that I'm forcing and, you know, that is meant for versus something that's meant for me and like meant to be, or is more inspiration guided and spirit led essentially. So when it comes to, when you say being guided, maybe you can explain for the listeners, like, what does that mean exactly? Or how do you per se, maybe you can share some examples of how you feel guidance in your life. I think what's coming to mind for me, maybe a question that could come up for listeners is like, oh, is that your intuition speaking? And again, discerning and listening to that intuition and what that feels like.
Yeah. Girl, so much came up in like you sharing that. And one major thing came up to me is that a big piece that Patrick and I think are really leaning into this season, this year, is in the course, Jesus says, I'm not going to quote it exactly. I'm not at that point yet, but my wish for you this year is to make it different by making everything the same. And so that's what we're really seeing. And it's interesting when we say that, people are like, well, then everything's the same. But it's not necessarily about that in that manner. It's about, you said that, you know, with travel and things, it's uprooted and there's change and it's unpredictable. But the truth is, and this is why travel is like a celestial speed up, when your intention is that, right? So the big piece is we set this intention. Many people go on travel to escape, right? As an opportunity to escape from reality, to get the constant dopamine hits, and to seek their happiness backpack. So your intention is a massive, like, decider of what you see, because what you seek is what you shall find. But the same to me is the leaning into, because when you're looking at the illusion, when you're looking at what's outside of you, you never have control over it. You create little false senses of security and control, right? In your routine at home, and your pillow, and, this or that, but we know how quickly those things can be ripped out from under us because it happens to people all the time, but it maybe doesn't happen every single day. Travel, those things can be ripped out from under you every single day, right? So then you really are faced with, whoa, am I ever actually in control? Or is it just these stories I'm telling myself that are behind these routines where I believe that this is a sense of control? So the same to me is when you lean in and you know that the truth is you are love and you can never be hurt by anything outside of you, and nothing outside of you can make you happy either. That's when everything becomes the same. That's when change and, loss or gain, it doesn't impact you anymore because you see it the same, which is all of it is just an illusion. So nothing is ranked higher or lower than the other, but it's literally all the same. So it's not that I'm saying like you have to find this ability to trust that it's all gonna like be how you want it to be, or surrender to the pain, but it's to go deeper within and to trust and surrender to the truth, which is that you are love and you cannot be harmed outside of you, and outside of you cannot make you happy. And the guidance is that internal state, right? When you're in that internal state, it's just kind of like you float through. I was actually listening to a video I recorded over a year ago, almost 2 years ago now, yesterday, and I was talking about grounding and how when I was really into the New Age movement, one of the big things is like being grounded and how important it is to be grounded, and how a lot of people would be like, Ashley, you are far from grounded. You're like up in the clouds. You need to become grounded. And what I've come to realize is like, do we really want to be grounded? Because to me, being grounded is being rooted deeper into the belief system of the ego and, needing to be in reality, right? Like come back to reality, when in fact, what if truth is up in the clouds? What if truth is not being grounded? What if truth is really being in this place of you're floating? And that's what true guidance is, because you're not sitting there contemplating as the person, Ashley, what I should do or not do, but instead you're floating with spirit who already knows this is the path. So you're not like in this like constant battle with self, but instead fully just like in this state of surrender and trust that you are love and one with love and just floating above the battlefield.
Well, I love what you shared. And I think this is for sure, like as you were speaking, I was thinking about, the challenges and just the different opportunities, especially again, on the topic of change that I faced. And, what you shared is really the reminder, and it's the ultimate journey in battle is that reminder of I am loved, I am held. And so finding that, however, I think is the ultimate challenge and trick in these moments. But I think too, something that came up too is like how much weight, I forget how you said it, but like we do place a lot of weight in these seasons, like these transitional seasons, and the connotations of like, oh, it has to be hard. There has to be death before there's rebirth. I'm curious on your stance on that, because I feel like that's a very common narrative of that, the seasonality, there's seasons of slowness, there's seasons of, creativity and speed and flow. And if I'm being totally honest, I wonder how much I have attached to me being in this season of like, this is my winter. Like I have to shed all these layers. I have to figure whatever I need to figure out before I can, go on and do whatever or feel inspiration again. It's almost like in a way, what's coming to me is like, maybe like a self-deprecating, almost masochistic, like I'm punishing myself energy. But I think that's so much of what's wrapped up in the narrative of like when people hear seasonality and all that, like having to go through these moments. Very curious on your perspective on that and how you see that, because I have a feeling like there's another opportunity where we're holding on to stories related to that story specifically.
I mean, it's a story, right? So you're telling yourself like, this is my season of winter, this is my season of spring, this is my season of summer. And a stories will keep you stuck because it's a belief system that has you rooted deeper in the belief of cause and effect within the illusion. But there is no cause and effect in the illusion. Everything is an effect. So if you are, not producing at the level of the business, it's not because the persona Evelina is in a season of winter. If Evelina is in a season of winter, that is completely independent of Evelina not doing well in business. Those are two effects. One doesn't cause the other because neither is a cause. They're both the effect of the greater cause, which comes from the mind. So that's where it's always going back to the unwinding of the mind, unwinding of these stories. But we want these stories because they just feel so good, right? If it's something outside of me, thank goodness. Okay, so this isn't going well because of this outside of me, like two things outside of me. Yes, I can just sit and know that the season outside of me will pass and that my business not doing well outside of me will come into the wellness as I just sit here and allow it to flow through. It's like instead of
it's too good.
yeah, but we're so taught that because that's so much easier than being like, okay, let's have a deep, dark expression session today where these radical, crazy ideas that are so dark are going to scare the shit out of you are going to come out of you. Like, nobody really wants to do that, right? And that's not how it always is. I mean, I'm painting probably not the greatest picture, but the biggest thing is like radical self-realization. Radical realization that you are not an individual and you are not your stories and you are not your thoughts. Like, whoa, hold the bus. You mean I am not actually the persona of Ashley? No, you're not. Like, I'm presenting in that manner right now. Like, this is the projection that I'm projecting through, but I'm love. I am Christ light. I am one with the mind, with all. Like, that is like mind-blowing process to think that. So yes, everything is a story. And it's about what are you hiding behind it?
Mm-hmm. Do you have any, I'm just thinking like, I guess like curious how you navigate these moments of when the dark thoughts come up. We call them ego rallies in Lighthouse. And I feel like for people tuning in and listening, maybe some resources. I don't know if I want to use the word resources, but just hearing your experience of how you go through them. Like, how do you grapple with these things? Do you lean on Patrick? Do you, because the expression sessions, I've for sure experienced them myself a lot in the last year. Mm-hmm. And, every single one will throw me for a loop. And it's almost like I forget to come back to these reminders. And so I'm curious if, especially over the time that you've been traveling, because they've come up so much more and frequently for you, how essentially you've learned to grapple with them and allow them, overcome them, etc.
Yeah. Prayer.
Yeah.
I think deep prayer, and, I am blessed to have Patrick with me. I think it's it's beautiful to have someone like that. I think that's why community is, I mean, the more and more we go deeper into this journey, the more I realize how impactful community is to the healing of the mind and the deeper unwinding of it. Because let's be honest, the ego has a hold on all of us. And so if I didn't have even Lighthouse, like sometimes, or Patreon, Lighthouse and Patreon, like I'll share like, oh my gosh, I had this deep, expression session and I was like, screw the world, screw the course, screw Jesus, it's all a bunch of BS. And like, I'll get to this state and then I just like have to honor myself and give myself grace. But when I share that, like it's also a part of the expression session, because holding on to it is like this me perpetuating this shame and guilt that I should feel shameful that I was feeling that way, and that I should not share that openly, and that I should pretend that it was something else. So for me, grace in prayer and staying in the present moment, like I bring myself back when I start to be like, oh my gosh, you did X, Y, and Z. I like bring myself back and I pray and I hand it over and pray and hand it over. Because it's all about the grace, I think, and the realization that you're not alone in this. And I think, again, bringing it back, that's why community for me is so important in this process. Whether you have like an online community, you have one good friend you talk to, you have, your community with your journal, because so easily in those moments of the dark thoughts, I mean, Evelina, the first time you had it, you were like, these thoughts are really dark. And I was like, yeah, let them up. But if you wouldn't have had someone that you trusted who's also been there, like I could have seen you push them down. Like, this makes no sense. These aren't thoughts Evelina has. Like, no.
Yeah.
Because the ego already has so much hold on you. So to be able to have this ability, and eventually, like, the unwinding my journey is eventually like the only teacher I'll need is that of Jesus, the only support, like, because my connection will be so opened back up with Jesus and the Holy Spirit that I won't need the projections. But you're projecting these people because to help you, right? Everything is either ego or spirit. It can't be both, and it can't be neither. It's one or the other. We were talking about that today in Patreon. Tommy so gracefully reminded us that literally everything is either ego or spirit, and it's either all ego or it's all spirit. You can't be half and half.
Yeah, I love this prayer and community, and it leaves me curious to ask you. I know we started the conversation with the question about joy, but I want to circle back to it and maybe have you share what have been some moments of joy that you've experienced on your travels specifically, because I know you've shared a bit in Lighthouse on some of the beautiful interactions that you've had with individuals. I mean, I imagine forming different communities there, which could be beautiful, but also challenging because you guys are always on the move. So it's the hellos and then the goodbyes that you anticipate coming. So yeah, tell us maybe a little bit, any stories or just moments that you've shared that come top of mind that maybe resonate for you, that really just feel special.
I think so many. I mean, we continue to make such beautiful, deep connections everywhere we go, whether it's a 1-minute connection or it's multiple days that we leave feeling like family. And the most recent one was when we left Bali and we really built like this little surfing community. And I was like, we have to go back. Like, and I still want to go back because I love surfing and I do love the people of Bali. But like, when we first left, I was like, we've got to go back. Oh my gosh, we've got to go back. And then Patrick kind of reminded me, I think it was in a Patreon call, we feel that way every time we leave. I was like, oh my gosh, we do. And then I had this like aha moment of like, these are all witnesses to the mind. So you project where you're at within, and the deeper of unwinding that we go within the mind, the connections we're seeing are just more and more beautiful. And the witnesses, like there's miracle coffee shops all over outside our place. And there's like a cabaret show that's called Miracle. And, we'll see unicorns. Joy has been huge. Like Joy, this beautiful owner of a cafe in Komoot, that was just like the most beautiful, inspired connection. And we did a whole video about it on our YouTube channel. But just the witnesses are so beautiful. And, there's so many stories of just the deeper remembrance and the deeper witnessing of the mirrors that are within. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know, Evelina, where I'm going with this, because I just feel such joy inside of me when you ask that, but I don't have the words to articulate what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could tell just from your share of the sentiments that you feel from the connections made. But I think you said it at the very beginning. It's the more that you allow the expressions of the darkness to come up and really work through and let go these stories, I could see more space being carved for you to just really savor and experience all these beautiful reminders and opportunities. The last question that I wanted to ask you, and it kind of came up and was sparked as you were speaking about Patrick, but I think this could be something that a lot of people could find relatability and also some guidance and inspiration on, is like traveling with a partner and what that's been like and how the both of you have whatever lessons or insights you've garnered from your experience together, because I mean, I could imagine, in the context of at least being in Tampa or in your home, you're comfortable, you know where to go, if you need to step away. But in travel, it's like there's none of that. You have to face whatever's happening head on in real time. So share with us whatever you feel called about your experiences navigating these travels with Patrick specifically.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring this up, because I have another friend that she's doing a bunch of solo travel, and it's almost a place of contention for us. It's a place I feel the ego comes in for me and for her, and we almost enter into attack in this conversation. And I've been very observant of that. But she would say that us traveling together is so much better than solo travel. And when she said that to me, it felt like attack originally. And I was talking to my mentor, David, and I realized what it was is like, neither is better, right? They both provide their opportunities in the aspect of mirrors, right? Because everything's a mirror. So maybe if you're solo traveling, your mirror is more like in interactions with random people or cars or places or food or this or that, but your opportunities for the mirrors will come up. The thing though for me is I'm literally living with a mirror every day, Patrick, like all day, every day. So when there are opportunities for forgiveness, when I'm in a place of projecting ego, that's what I see in him, and it gets really hard. And I was telling my mentor, I was like, there's been a lot of sickness, a lot of illness has been the attacks the body for us through the travels. I will say the last 2 places we haven't got sick yet, but one day he was sick, and it was like the most inspired day I had. I was like, it was amazing. And I was telling my mentor, David, I was like, it was like, I just got to put the mirror down and pretend I had no issues. And I just got to like go with the flow and just like live in spirit. But also on the flip side of that, like I talk about the negative, as we're unwinding the mind more and more, like it's just this deeper joy that's more consistent within us both, constantly being the mirror for one another, which is just so, so beautiful. And it also helps me to see, I've really probably shifted my perspective in the last probably a couple of weeks, of when Patrick is reflecting, something that's causing discomfort within me. Of course, it's because I'm coming from a place of the ego. And so I'm really starting to shift my perspective and see that like as one of those opportunities of like, oh, this is what's going on in the mind. If I clear it through, more joy can come in. If I clear this through, more joy can come in. And so almost seeing it as an invitation for more joy instead of an attack to steal my joy. Do I always get that? No. But I would say, traveling with him has really heightened the experience and probably added greatly to the celestial speed up, because we really can't ever hide from ourselves. And we also are never like alone in the aspect of the world, and we can always have deeper conversations and really unpack with one another, which is just really beautiful. Yeah.
I love this. And I find some relatability from it too, as the last couple weeks now, I think it's been close to 2 weeks, if not a little over, of moving in with my partner, with Lewis, and seeing that too, of really being faced and met with, okay, something is on my heart or bothering me, and there's no escaping it. It's like, you got to face it. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. He has for sure been my biggest mirror, but I can imagine that with travel, and especially as we talked about in the beginning, those creature comforts being removed, it's just more variables that you have in the mix. Things are always changing and in flux, and you're being met with facing your stories and all of that. Mm-hmm. And so more opportunity for projection, but on the flip side too, more opportunities for support, because you have someone to lean on and almost like literally go through that together. I remember I definitely shared with you, Ashley, when I caught food poisoning with Lewis after Thanksgiving break. Mm-hmm. And we were just in this apartment all weekend together. But I remember coming out of that weekend, I'm like, man, I definitely feel much closer with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, even though there was some projection. So no, it's so beautiful. And I love hearing your experiences and all the realizations that you always have in just navigating this journey with Patrick, and him truly just being such a support system for you. And ultimately, I mean, at the end of the day, a mirror, but I love it. I love it so much. The last question that I want to ask you is just related to what's ahead. What's something you're looking forward to? I mean, I know you guys have been taking this trip just so organically, and really, I mean, you always remind me to not ever plan and to just live in the moment and be present. But I'm just curious if there's anything that you are looking forward to with your forthcoming travels.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, like that is a huge reminder we constantly get, is to not plan, because every time I have planned, it does not go as planned, and it's an opportunity for forgiveness for me. But I would say the deepening of the joy. And another thing with traveling with Patrick is, I think the more we go deeper within the mind, the more we really are becoming one. I know people are like, what? But we really are. I feel more and more in tune and just like the oneness. So I really look forward to that, because to be honest with you, I'm really kind of done with like looking forward to the things at the level of form, like not placing weight. Like I have some cool upcoming things of, getting to see Julie. She's a member of Lighthouse in person in Amsterdam. And, of course I'm excited for that. But again, like that's in the future. Like here in the present moment, I know we're continuing to unwind the mind. And I know that like seeing Julie or not seeing Julie are both going to be opportunities for an extension of love and forgiveness. And I honestly don't know, until like Julie is right in front of me, I don't know if I'm going to see her, right? Like, because that's the reality of how our travels have gone. So I think just more and more opportunities for deepening of joy and really sinking further into the oneness, and trust. Like, trust.
Yeah. I love this so much. Well, thank you, Ashley, for sharing
you.
all of your takeaways and insights. I really hope that people tuning into this conversation walk away with really just some nuggets to consider, especially as it relates to, I think, placing weight on the external things. I know travel is obviously very, central in your theme right now of life. And I think for a lot of us, we lean so much on travel for that escapism. And so whether it is that, whether it's a forthcoming trip or plans for the future to move or, really be taken out of context, or if it comes down to many of the things we talked about, like food or, any creature comforts, relationships, people, being mindful and really asking yourself, what weight is being placed on this? What story do I have wrapped around it? How would I navigate life if this wasn't part of my everyday? That's really an interesting, we could even say like a journal prompt and invitation for someone to sit with, because I can imagine a lot of stuff being unearthed from just that question alone. So thank you for always being so open and vulnerable and sharing your story. Can you just share with people where they could find you? You have a new YouTube channel documenting your travels. So if people wanted to follow along on your journey, where they could find that?
Yeah, so we have a YouTube channel, Everywhere But Nowhere 33. And you can follow along there. We also have an Instagram with the same title. And some of these deeper concepts we were talking about, I have YouTube channel called Big Miracle Energy. And actually recently, Pat and I were talking that we may be coming out with a more frequent conversation between the two of us called A Course and a Coffee. His inspiration, totally going with him. So stay tuned. That'll be posted on Big Miracle Energy for sure. But yeah, if you ever want to chat or have questions, Ashley at coachwithashley.net. And we never know where we're going to be in the world. So if you really found this conversation with Evelina, enticing and would love to grab coffee with us, just send me an email and say, this is where I am in the world. Please message me on WhatsApp if you're ever in this area in the world, because that's really what this is about. We want to connect. We want to connect with like-minded individuals and those just, wanting to further extend the love and connection with their brother and sister.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Ashley. Appreciate you.
Thank you, friend.